It's the Weekly Feed. I'm Kyle Meredith, and I got Rick, and I got Simon, and this is the Kaiser Chiefs, so at least like 2/5 of the Kaiser Chiefs. How's it going, fellas?
Good, yeah.
It's great. It's nice to be back in America doing some shows again.
Yeah, it was nice to have you back. You know, there was that moment there where we weren't sure that we were going to have you back.
There was a moment where we thought we weren't going to. But then, when it's in danger of being taken away from you, you start realizing how much you want it.
Yeah. Phoenix rising from the ashes.
More like a child with a toy being taken away from it.
No,
Give
I want
me
it.
back, yeah. But a phoenix rising from the
That's
ashes.
much more, yeah. I know yours is much more poetic. Sure, let's go with that one.
But yeah, it's true, and it lit a fire underneath it.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's good. That's good because I mean, you're kind of such important part of the last decade musically. I mean, there was a sound and a time and a place, and if you can get latched onto that, and I guess it's kind of twofold too. It's a double-edged sword rather, because on one hand you get time stamped, and on the other hand, you know, but you've got to overcome that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we've done on this record. Really, I think we're in danger of being like, Abject Riot and Ruby and all those the songs from that sort of time were really great. And coming back to America, it's just like we've only done one gig so far, but it was great to sort of see the audience, and they do know Abject Riot, and they do know Every Day with S&S and Ruby and stuff, and because we're not very big in America, so you sort of think that no one's ever heard of us over here. But actually, it's quite good to come back and feel like we've done a bit of there's a bit of music history here as well. But anyway, back to the point. So yeah, we felt like this, not to trade on past glories. You know what I mean? I think that's important to us, to have a career and to sort of keep writing. And so we were number one in England, and that was a really big sort of moment for us, because it was 7 years, was it, after our last number one?
Wow.
I think that shows that we're sort of
having
having ups and downs.
But also, I mean, not just being a band, but life in general is about overcoming stuff, and that's what makes a career. You know what I mean? It's the ups and downs, and you know, it's great for those guys that just have ups, but then it just explodes at the end of that. And
I know the mini bands that just have ups, though.
Yeah, well,
I mean, we've been talking a lot about, friends and I.
But you never hear them again because they just disappear.
But even like Dylan had a bad decade. That was a bad 10 years, you know.
Exactly, and you know, you just have to look at other people, and you have to go, so what? You know, so an album didn't necessarily stick to the wall. It's not a reason to give up. When something's broken, you fix it. You don't throw it away. So we fixed it.
You did it. Education, and war. You've made it really fun for DJs like me.
I like the fact that everyone around, everybody pronounces it differently. It's only like, actually 3 words.
Okay.
5 words.
It's only 3. It's just one of them's repeated.
All right.
But everyone says it different. I mean, education, and war.
Yeah, it's got a good. Well, that's the fun. And war.
I mean,
it's going to have a nickname at some point.
We really shot ourselves in the foot with that, because I mean, it's not good on Twitter either. You've got to write.
You can't hashtag that.
No, But then the thing is, this is a part of our new kind of philosophy, which was in the past we'd shy away from doing things that we thought were had any element of risk to it.
Oh yeah.
But then you realise that that's what makes you boring, and doing stuff that you think, well, that's what we want to do, so let's do that. And we wanted to call it that, so we go, well, let's call it that. Don't worry about. I mean, the amount of times we thought of titles, then kind of try to think about the review and how they could change it or twist it to make a pun which was negative about us, and then you kind of just go, do you know what? If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. Yeah. So don't worry about. We're not writing a record for them. We're writing it for the people. We're writing it for, hopefully, for everybody.
Yeah.
But
it's really interesting to hear you say that, because in not wanting to take chances, because when I hear your music, and especially when I go back to think about the first time that I heard Riot or Dancer or any of those, I mean, those were chances. Those were, those weren't just like everything else. That wasn't the safe side. I mean, I think back to 2005, and we were kind of having a musical revolution. I think that you guys were part of this unofficial club that was happening, but it wasn't, you could have just as easily wrote the big Nickelback song, and thank God you didn't. These were chances.
But it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because I really don't want to be one of those people in bands that ever kind of talks about a past album like it was really bad or anything. But I do think in some ways we did take the edges off, and I don't know why we did that. It was about, I mean, we might have compromised at some point, trying to do what we thought we should be doing rather than what we do naturally. And when we came back to make this record, it was so much like it was just like when it was the first rehearsal.
Yeah.
It felt it was not in a kind of way where you go, oh yeah, it felt like we're a new band again, because everyone says that because that's what we're supposed to say.
Right.
But it literally was a new band because we didn't know what the hell we were doing, because we'd lost a member, and he was very important. It wasn't just like losing a drummer. It was losing the drummer.
But he was a part of the last record with Medieval, and
Yeah.
I mean, so even it seems like regardless of how that breakup happened, it feels like everybody was a bit directionless. Like it wasn't you versus him directionless. It's that album really did. I mean, as big a fan as I am, it was even the point where I was going, I wonder what they're up to right now. You know,
we didn't really know. I mean, the reason we really wanted to make it, we wanted to carry on, and Nick was losing interest then about being in the band, and so we came up with the idea, the selling it on the internet and you can choose tracks. Basically, as a way of kind of getting him excited about it,
right?
And because he was, I don't know if he knew what. I mean, a lot of bands lose sight of who they are and what they want to be, and I think at that point he had done that. But when we kind of regrouped, we realised that it's you don't have to think about it too much. Right. You just have to make noises until the ones you like are ready to go into the studio.
It's a good motto right there. Yeah, I think there was the point where I saw that it was a different record in the UK than it was in America, and you got to think. Oh, something's wrong there.
It got massively complicated.
It did, yeah.
I mean, it sort of seemed in keeping with the record to have different in America because the whole point was that everybody's record would be different. And it was like released in America a year later and stuff. It was just, I don't know, it's a very interesting time.
I didn't even want there to be a physical record, but then there has to be a physical record. But why does there have to be a physical record nowadays? Because nowadays no one buys physical records. So it's like, it was really complicated. And even I started not being able to answer questions in interviews because I didn't know what was going on.
so you put the brakes on. You say, hey, let's take
to an extent, musically, you could kind of tell what we've been listening to that morning when you every song. It was directionless. But sometimes, I mean, that's great. I think it's amazing that a band is allowed to just do an album that they don't really know what they're doing in order to find the path again, I
think it was where we were at the time as well. I think the whole thing is where we were at the time, which was I think we were a little bit directionless and we were experimenting with a few, like trying to find what we wanted to do and everything. But I think without that record, there wouldn't be this record. Because when we kind of convened to do this record, straight away the plan was do a CD, do like 10, 11 tracks, do 45 minutes of music, and just make it quite traditional and go and be a band, write a record in a rehearsal room together, not just sort of like someone jams something and then we sort of go into a studio and like add a little bit and then that's finished.
And there's the excitement.
And like, well, that's exciting, definitely. But let's do it now. I'm like, if we'd have played that for 2 weeks, it would be a better song that we'd released.
Different, right?
Also, the thing is I don't want to keep banging on about that record because I don't even know what to call it in America. The thing is, we don't want to be one of those bands that digs their heels on the ground and goes, we're not going to evolve, because if you don't evolve, you won't survive.
Right.
So we wanted to evolve, so we were doing something different. But it took doing something different to make us realise that some of the rules about making records aren't just rules that you have to dig your heels in and live by. They exist for a reason. Like we suddenly were like looking at our favourite records, and they were all between 42 and 45 minutes long, and they all had and even if it was a double album like that, The Wall, both sides were 42 minutes, and we were going, there's a reason for this. There's a reason there's 10 to 12 tracks. It's because it's evolved to be like that, and it's good. And although we don't want to be saying that you can't release music in any other way, we kind of fell back in love with making a record for a record's sake. And even when the songs were getting finished this year, I think all of us kind of, without talking about it, knew their place on the record, like track listing wise. They just kind of fell into position. It started like making sense, and without having to force it. And it was because we'd spent the previous 12 months really forcing it, and it was really, it was a tough year, but we both agreed we've never had more of a rewarding year than we'd had writing this record.
It's really interesting that you bring up the science of songwriting too, because it's something about like, how do we get from classical music to jazz to the 3.5-minute pop song? Because that's what we want to hear with the repeating chorus. And so you take that mold, there's a mold and there's a structure and there's parameters, and you have to make it interesting. And you have to work with it.
I think during that year, we sort of learned a little bit more about songwriting in terms of, I think when we on Employment, I think we wrote quite instinctively. Yeah. We just we really know what we were doing.
Sure.
And then when you get, more experienced, whatever, you sort of, as you say, start second guessing yourself and trying to work things out. You know what I mean? But then I think it's important to sort of know some of the rules, but then be able to ignore them if you know what I mean, because you know them.
Sure.
But then not
Take
try
it
and
interesting, right?
Not try and just do something interesting for the sake of it. It's got to have a reason, but then you want people to listen to it and you want people to be on the radio, so you've got to sort of pander to that a little bit.
Here's the part about overthinking it, right?
Yeah, but then again, I mean, you've also got to think, what do you like? And there's an element of us that if we went to a festival, we want to see the band who you could sing along to and jump along to and enjoy in that way. And so many people try and be what they think they want to be and not what they want to be. And in many ways, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I think one of the hardest art forms is writing a pop song that can appeal to 50,000 people in a field all at the same time
without it being bland.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's usually the tipping point with a lot of pop music is like, oh, we've made it the big thing.
And if you look at some of the best pop music around, from like you Get Lucky to Raw, it's actually really interesting. And I do think Raw is a really interesting song.
I'm not gonna argue that.
Well, it is. It's great.
But so that's we're talking about songwriting, and that was kind of the press release before that. It's like, okay, so you guys had to, you lose your songwriter, the guy who's supposedly the songwriter and everything, and I don't know the ins and outs of that part, but it almost makes it sound like, oh no, we have to learn how to write songs, and because this album, I mean, it is. There's a distinction. It's the Kaiser Chiefs, but it sounds like something different. So I've gotten right here. It's the first post greatest hits album.
Yeah.
And that happens with a lot of bands. Once you decide, okay, here's our greatest hits, time passes, here's our next record. You get that. It's like, okay, here's a new band, it's the same band, but it's a new band. And what was it? Because if someone else through the years is kind of supplying you like, okay, here's our batch of songs, was there ever that point where you guys had to look at each other and say, how do we do this together?
I just think that we saw it as a clean slate, I think. I think the greatest hits thing and also Nick leaving and lots of timing things that came together, like 10 years together and things like that. I think we saw it as a total clean slate and we can do what we want. There was a little bit of like, we don't want to just totally shun the Kaiser Chiefs identity entirely, but we wanted to, we were at the
about as a country band.
We could do what we wanted, and write what we wanted. And I think what's a few press articles and stuff about Nick writing out all the songs and that sort of thing. It just made us sort of fueled the fire.
Yeah, right.
I think he and everybody we just felt they were underrating what we'd put in the band for 10 years, and we set out to prove them all wrong.
Clearing it right now.
So it was great, what I mean? It's always good to prove everyone wrong.
Yeah.
That's what you're in the band for.
But like, we didn't even really, apart from Nick, we didn't really want to bring out a greatest hits because we didn't feel it was the right time, but Nick knew he was leaving, so it was a good thing for him because it was like
clean it up, tie it up.
Yeah, exactly. Put a bow on it.
Sure, right.
And
it's a greatest hits, by the way. You guys got some good singles, so this works.
Couple moments.
It's really good. We just didn't really want it to come out at that time, and it was kind of good that it did in the end. But I feel that. It's a very odd thing for them to do that because it's one of those things where, at the time it feels like the worst thing that can happen, but then you look back and go, actually, it was probably the best thing to happen for us, and everyone was doing us a massive favour in making that happen because it pushed us on to make this thing.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. The new record, again, education, and more. Is that better?
Yeah, you like it.
No, seriously, guys, thank you so much for jumping in here.
Thank you very much
indeed.
We really enjoyed it.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Great stuff.
Yeah.